The Giants wrapped up mini camp and they're off till training camp. So let's recap all the plays and all the news coming out of mini camp with Paul Schwartz, our longtime Giants beat writer for the Post. All right, Paul. Mini camp wrapped up. You guys are out there. You saw anything and everything. First and foremost, thanks for hopping on with us. What's some of your biggest takeaways so far coming out of that mini camp?
Well, my first takeaway is, Brandon, that was the best intro I've ever heard you do. You know why? Because you said mini camp is wrapped up and there's no more until training camp, right? That means like the groundhog, right? 6 more weeks. I mean, this is it. This is it, right? I mean, April 15th, I think the Giants started. Now, the media was not allowed out there every day to watch practice and OTAs and things like that. But it's a pretty extensive program, as you know, and now it ends, right? I mean, I think Thursday the Giants had some meetings and a team barbecue, and then, Brian Daboll tells them the old speech that you've heard many times, right? You got 6 weeks, take care of your body, be careful, don't get in trouble, represent the organization well, represent yourself well. And, from my point of view, it's like, you hope you don't hear from these guys, because if you do, it's usually for something not so great, right? My impressions were, I think the Giants got out of this all off-season program and their mini camp healthy. They had a few little, couple of the receivers got knocked around a little bit late in camp, but they all should be fine. The way Brian Daboll put it is, at this point, every player on the roster should be ready to go for training camp, barring something strange. That's in 6 weeks from now. That gives guys like Evan Neal and Daniel Jones a little extra time to heal. So, I think it was very productive off season. A lot of new faces, as usual. A lot of new coaches, which is not so usual. So a lot of newness going on.
This next 6 weeks as a player, stay out of the news. Get ready to make news. Get ready to come in, be wrote about during training camp and all throughout the season, because you're making plays. Got to get the mind right. You got to spend as much time with the family. Anything that you need to do now, whether it's buy a house, buy a new car, handle it right now within this 6 weeks, because once you walk into that facility come late July, you're not coming out of there until, January, February. So it's an exciting time as a player to get your mind and body right until, it's live bullets after that. But one of the biggest storylines coming out of minicamp, and you wrote about it, Brian Daboll, Mike Kafka kind of talked about Daboll calling plays during the spring and possibly during the season. After watching all the OTAs, Paul, all the minicamp, you heard both guys talk about it. What do you think about Daboll's taking over play calling duties?
Well, as I wrote in the Thursday's New York Post, I think it's a really good move. Now, I also thought 2 years ago when Brian Daboll was hired, that was the big question, right? Brian Daboll spent the 4 years before he came to the Giants calling plays for the Bills. And let's face it, that's why he became the head coach of the Giants, because their offense was prolific. Josh Allen developed into a star quarterback. The Giants were taken by that, and they said, okay, let's have some of that over here with the Giants, right? But he was a first-time head coach, a rookie head coach, and I thought it was the right thing 2 years ago, play caller. He hired Mike Kafka, who 2 years ago was 34 years old and had never called plays. But so that was a great leap of faith to give him the play calling. That was, an interesting move, but I thought it was the right move because Brian Daboll had to concentrate on coaching and managing the whole team, not having this, right? You know what these offensive guys look like, right? That's what they look like, right? They're like this, right? They're going like this. They can't see the whole field. They got that sheet in front of them. So I thought it was the right thing. But now, 2 years later, they're coming off an awful offensive year. Quarterbacks getting hurt left and right. As I wrote about Mike Kafka, to say that he's responsible for the whole offense and the passing game, going to hell last year, is like saying you got a massive leak in your basement and you're blaming the guy who dropped an ice cube on the floor. You know what I mean? It's not all Mike Kafka, but this is the right move at the right time. Now, Daboll has not come out and said, I am calling the plays, but he did it all spring, and Mike Kafka and he have danced around this. But Daboll has said, he said this spring, I miss it. I like doing it. I'll see what I'm going to do. And Kafka finally kind of fessed up the other day and said, look, who used to call the plays for the Giants as opposed to a guy who's going to call the plays once this season starts.
So now that Daboll has been calling the plays all throughout the spring, did you notice anything different in the play calling? More outside runs, more quick game, deep balls? Like, what's your thoughts on the way Brian Daboll kind of has taken over and added Dabes into the offense?
Well, I mean, I don't want to make too many, real definite opinions on that because, as Daboll said, this is a teaching camp. You know what I mean? So, but look, the plays got in quick. It seemed like Daboll knows what he's doing. This is not a first-time guy. I don't think they took. I know for a fact they didn't take a tremendous amount of deep shots, Brandon. I don't think that's what this camp was all about. So I saw a lot of motion at the line. I saw a lot of receivers interchanging places on the field. Like I said, a lot of motion, a lot of guys moving from side to side. Wan'Dale Robinson the other day, the first day of the minicamp, made a big play, kind of but he was lined up on the outside, and we think of him as more of a slot guy. Lined up on the outside, a little bit of an in-cut, got a step on Cordell Flott, and that was one of those good news, bad news things, right? Yeah. Which you see in training camp. Good news, Wan'Dale Robinson puts his foot in the ground, makes the catch, runs for a 60-yard touchdown. Bad news, he did it against Cordell Flott, who they want to be a starting cornerback this year. I'm going to reserve a little judgment on what the offense will look like with Daboll calling the plays. But look, he's a natural play caller. So I think one interesting byproduct of this, Brandon, is that I think Brian Daboll definitely has come into this year saying, I just want to be a little calmer on the sideline. Mm-hmm. I have to be myself, but that going ballistic, maybe it's me, but it's a bad look. And I want to just, I want to have a personality and I want to be emotional without maybe going overboard. And as your father's a coach, because you're calling the plays, play after play after play, you don't have time to go ballistic, right? You don't have the time on offense, right? You got to go to the next play, the next play, the next play. So he can't, he's forced to be calmer and go on and be more disciplined because he's calling the play. So that could have a nice positive effect as a byproduct of him calling the plays, that maybe he has to settle down because he's got to call the next play. And
that gives more responsibility to Mike Kafka, who's the assistant head coach, because now you kind of have to help out in terms of keeping an eye on how many timeouts do we have left, clock management, keeping timeouts or for the defense. So Shane Bowen and that defense can have timeouts if they need to stop the clock. So that's going to be a pretty interesting dynamic going into the spring and into the fall when the season starts. Obviously, we got to talk about the obvious, Paul. It's first time there are practices, OTAs, sessions without Saquon. Life without Saquon, was it a different vibe out there? And as media, were you guys kind of like forced to look at other players instead of just focusing on 2-6 like everyone has been used to the last couple of years?
Was there a different vibe out there? Yes, there was a different vibe out there. Yes. Look, when Saquon Barkley is on the field and healthy, you watch him, you look at him. First of all, he was a big personality. He was talking to guys. He was giving Dexter Lawrence grief. He was talking to the, Kayvon Thibodeau. He was mixing it up with the coaches. He's a big personality. He was a magnetic guy, a real leader. So yes, when look now, Devin Singletary walks in. He has worn number 26 his career in the NFL. Okay, so he should wear 26 here if he wants to. The number's not retired, but look, he's not as big a guy as Saquon, right? So I have to admit, when you first come out there, your eyes are drawn to 26. It's like, dude, boy, Saquon shrunk, didn't he? Saquon got a lot shorter, and what happened to his legs? They're gone. So that was something to get used to. Yes, and the running back situation now it's a pretty nondescript group. You have to admit that. I mean, Devin Singletary is a proven player in the league, right? Good player. He's never reached 1,000 yards. He's not a star player. He's not a Pro Bowl player. He's a workman-like, decent running back, okay? That's not what Saquon Barkley was called. Then you have what? Tyrone Tracy, a rookie. You have Eric Gray, a second-year guy who did very little last year. You have Dante Miller, who, comes in from Columbia and played 3 or 4 years at Columbia in New York City, nicknamed Turbo, and spent a little bit of time in South Carolina. You have Jay Sean Corbin back. It is a very nondescript group, not a lot of, skins on the wall, not a lot of pedigree. And, it's one of the reasons why around the league, people look at the Giants and go, they lost Saquon and they signed Devin Singletary, and they have there's no Matt Breida there, so it's a group that will really, really have to prove itself, because right now no one thinks very highly of them.
And I think that's another reason why Brian Daboll is kind of calling the plays, because if you look at when he was in Buffalo, he really didn't have a Saquon-ish type back. He didn't have a running back one, an RB1 that other defenses prepared for and feared. So, but what they did is they tried to replace that Saquon explosion in production with Malik Nabers. They added another playmaker on the outside. Malik Nabers was all over my social media feeds. It looked like the playmakers were making plays out there between the whole Spider-Man meme with Jalen Hyatt, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Nabers. What do you think about Nabers so far? You were right there and you watched this guy. Is that OBJ 2.0?
But look, first of all, when people say, who do you want him to draft? Who are you rooting for? Look, I don't root. I like to see, I picked Nabers in the paper in my final mock draft, so I was glad I looked good and they picked him. But if you give me a choice of a dynamic wide receiver as a first-round pick and an offensive tackle, both are vitally important, right? Andrew Thomas is one of the most important players on the team. Who do I want to watch every day out in the hot sun in minicamp and in training camp? The receiver, right? The receiver's exciting. No question about it. Look, shorts and T-shirts, shorts and T-shirts, shorts and T-shirts. You can't get too hyped or excited about it. But, and there is a but. The but is that there is no question Malik Nabers is as advertised as an athlete. He puts his foot in the ground. He's not a small guy. He's 6 foot. He's 200 pounds. He's got, you can tell muscle in his legs. He can change a direction, explosiveness. You know what wide receivers look like. Odell was not that explosive of a player as far as put your foot in the foot ground and see almost like a violent move. Odell was just a blur. And Odell was, I'm not taking anything away from Odell. When Odell was healthy, which he wasn't a lot of his early time with the Giants. Don't forget, he missed the first 4 games of his rookie year with a hamstring strain. But he was a blur, and he was, incredibly dynamic. He was one of the best I've ever seen it. The trick shots, one-handed, behind his back, taking a football, spinning it on the ground, and kicking a 30-yard field goal. I mean, Odell, would win a lot of money in bar bets because he was the most high hand-eye coordination guy I've almost ever seen. Yeah. And that, parlayed into what he could do on the field. But Nabers is first of all, as a media member, speaking to him, he's very pleasant. He's wide-eyed. He looks you right in the eye when he talks to you. He answers the questions. He seems a delightful young man to talk to for a very young guy. And on the field, you want to temper your expectations just because that's the prudent thing to do. But nothing I saw this spring will put a check mark in my notebook that says, I'm not sure about this guy. If healthy, he's going to be a good player. Now, will he be a great player as a rookie? Will he be exceptional? We'll see. That's a lot on a rookie. The guys around him have to kind of develop around him, so it's not all on him. But, I would think the Giants are extremely pleased by everything they've seen so far with Nabers.
I mean, with everything that you're saying, everything that we saw on social media, this brings back that pro-Odell Giants fan base. That brings them back on board. Because when Odell left and was traded away, that explosion within the offense just left. I mean, how many times has that dude had 3 catches, 100-something yards, and a touchdown or 2 to go with it? And it's like he single-handedly put that offense on his back. That's what a lot of people, you don't want to put that on a rookie, but like you said, if this kid is as advertised, then I think he brings that explosion back into the Giants offense. And then now you don't have to worry about Saquon Barkley having to do it all, having to be that production when it comes to that explosion, that downfield, that big play within the offense. So, I can't wait to see this dude line up. And I just told you before we even started filming, I think during preseason, his first catch is going to go for 20-plus.
Now the question the fans are come back with you at is who's throwing him the ball?
Okay.
Who's throwing them? You know what I mean? And I get it. I get it. You know, yeah. Well, we got a weapon. You know, we got a gun. There's no bullets. Whatever. Whatever comparison you want to make. We have a stud out there. We can't get him the ball now. It was a bit of a downer. We saw Daniel Jones in individual drills and 7-on-7, and that was totally the plan. And I was not surprised for a second that we didn't see Daniel Jones in any 11-on-11. In the OTAs and in the 2 days of real 2-hour practices on the mandatory minicamp. There was no Daniel Jones in 11-on-11. Now, as you know, 11-on-11 is not threatening. Nobody gets sacked, but there is a line in front of you. There's more risk to get stepped on, to have someone kind of spin in your direction, things like that. There was no reason to put Daniel Jones in any kind of harm's way now. Now he gets another 6 weeks to let that right knee maybe rest up a little bit, get stronger. And in training camp, I would be actually surprised if those first 11-on-11s, Daniel Jones is not in them. I think he will be. Daniel said his metrics now, as far as what he is doing, running, cutting, speed, strength, is better than it was before the knee injury. As you know, Daniel Jones is an incredible worker. That's one no one can ever say about Daniel Jones. First one in, last one out. The other day, Jalen Hyatt was saying, the dude comes in like 5:30, in the morning, whatever. Now, I don't know if it's exactly 5:30 because Jalen Hyatt's not in there at 5:30. But, I don't know how he would know that. You know what I mean? So, when people say, when did you come in? He says, I don't know when he came in, but he was here when I was here. You know what I mean? That doesn't, I don't know what that means when you're there. You know what I mean? Maybe you got there at 8:20 for an 8:30 meeting. That I don't know. But, he hard worker. So, having Nabers and Hyatt and Wan'Dale Robinson catch passes from Drew Lock. Now, this helps Drew Lock, right? Drew Lock got all the, a tremendous amount of 7-on-7 and, the vast majority of the 11-on-11. Tommy DeVito got some of that too, but Drew Lock got way more of the team period stuff, 11-on-11, than he would have if Daniel Jones was healthy. So that's helped him acclimate and learn, which Drew Lock said is a very complicated offense.
You said who's going to throw Nabers or Hyatt the ball. I come back and I see you with who's going to block for the thrower. How did that offensive line look? I know they weren't in the pads, in full pads. Do they at least look like they're taking steps in the right direction?
Well, if you would have Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau on a video or a podcast, they will say, well, I had 50 sacks this spring. You know what I mean? Because that's what outside linebackers think when they put a little move on a guy and nobody's really blocking and it looks like a sack, right? Well, I mean, I think we got some clarity on what the Giants' plan is. The Giants' plan is to have Andrew Thomas back at left tackle, no surprise. John Michael Schmidt's back for his second year at center, no surprise. John Runyon at right guard, which is a mild surprise. He's played right and left guard in his years with Green Bay, but has said that he preferred left guard. That's where he played last year. He's at right guard. I'll tell you why I think that is in a minute. And Jermaine Illuminor at left guard. Now, Illuminor, when he was signed, he had started the last 2 years basically exclusively at right tackle for the Raiders. So I thought maybe his signing would be kind of a swing tackle role, and he's the right tackle if Evan Neal either is not back from ankle surgery or just doesn't play well. But I think they're looking at this, and you know what these guys always say, Brandon, right? Who are my 5 best linemen? They think Jermaine Illuminor is one of their 5 best linemen, and they want him to play a starting left guard spot. Now, that brings me to right tackle. Neal is coming off ankle surgery. He had a small fracture in the ankle, so he's just not ready. He's not ready. He's standing off, he's watching. He's just not ready. And so Josh Azuda was playing a lot of right tackle with the starting unit, which I know a lot of fans, when they heard that and they saw videos and they saw tweets and stories about that, were alarmed. I don't think Josh Azuda will be the right tackle if Neal can't play. I think that's why Illuminor is here. He can go out and play right tackle at a moment's notice. He said that the other day. I think the reason they want Runyon at right guard is I think they want a veteran guard presence next to Evan Neal when Evan Neal is back. You know what I mean? So, tackle, it's the guard. They have to work, and then the center. And so they want a guy like Runyon to be over there. So He gets Neal in the right spots. He gets him in the right protections. He's a sounding board for him. He can kind of steer him in the right direction. I think Evan Neal, if you would say to me right now, give me the top 5 key players for this year, Neal would unquestionably be in the top 5, and he might not get out of the top 2, and he might not get out of the top 1. He needs to start at right tackle. He needs to be a good player. That's it. He doesn't need to be a star. He needs to be a good, serviceable, dependable player. I know he's the number 7 pick in the 2022. Settle for healthy and good. Okay, and then we'll see where we go from there. And I think the jury is very much still out on that, because if he is that, then you can see their plan. Illuminor, it should be a good guard. Runyon has been a good guard in this league. John Michael Schmitz is taking a more of a leadership role. He'll be a steady center, maybe better, and you have a stud at left tackle. Now you have the semblance of a unit that maybe you can work with here. But if it's not Neal, then you have to move a guy. Then maybe like an Aaron Stinney comes in and plays guard, and now you're kind of shuffling the deck a little bit. So it's a huge summer up ahead for Neal. He needs to show he's healthy. He needs to show that he's got this competitive spirit and that he's a lot better than he was in his first 2 years.
With the Darren Waller retirement, from what you've seen so far throughout OTAs and minicamp, does his retirement leave a void at the tight end position?
I think it does, yeah. Now, look, he didn't really fill that void tremendously last year. Now, still, in 12 games, he caught 50 passes and only 1 touchdown. He did not do as advertised. He got another hamstring injury, and the passing game was dysfunctional, so it wasn't all on Darren Waller. But, yeah, it does. Now, this did not leave the Giants surprised by this. There's no question it did not. They figured he was retiring, and he did retire. They gave him his space. Darren Waller's got some things he's got to deal with in his life, certainly. He's okay with Darren Waller. But, this is like we mentioned about the running back position. Around the league, people look at this and say, Giants tight ends, they're nothing special here. Daniel Bellinger returns. He did very little this spring. He's got a little something. I don't know what it was. Brian Daboll said he's got a little something, but he should be fine for training camp. So, he didn't do a lot of team stuff. He's a serviceable tight end. Is he a big ticket? Throw the ball to him, often? Probably not. He's a pretty good blocker. I think he's going to be a decent player and a decent draft pick, but I don't think look at him and say he's a star tight end. Now, that's the reason they drafted Theo Johnson from Penn State. He's a big dude. He can run a little bit. I think he can catch the ball. He's developing as a blocker, and I think he will play meaningful snaps as a rookie. Is he going to be the second coming of Kelsey or of Kittle? I would doubt it, but I think he's got potential there. Working in concert with Bellinger, and the one who's known, with the Jets is kind of a guy who can catch the ball. Really not maybe a strong blocker. And Brian Daboll went out of his way the other day to say he's playing fast, knowing what he's doing. He said he liked his schedule, meaning he comes in, early and stays late, which is good. So maybe Lawrence Cager can be a guy who can, be a receiving threat of some sort. But, right now this is not a position where you circle and say the Giants have a lot of pluses and a lot of real answers at tight end. At best, it will be a dependable workman-like group, it looks like.
Hey, I know a lot of the defensive guys are going to get upset with us because we didn't kind of recap for the defensive side. Tay Banks, Cordell Flott, sorry guys. You guys, there's not much. You're not competing for balls during minicamp and all. You got to stay healthy, but we'll be sure to give you guys love in training camp, talk about the defense. Paul, 6 weeks. See you in 6 weeks, my man. Training camp. Can't wait.
Thank you. Yes, 6 weeks. It's the clock is ticking, and hope it's a slow clock. Let the clock take its time and let those 6 weeks come nice and easy, and then I'll be ready for training camp. Yes.